Welcome, everyone, and thanks for taking time out of your busy days to participate in this session, especially to those of you that are joining us from provinces where Remembrance Day is a stat holiday. It's not here in Ottawa, but of course, I hope everyone has found some time today to remember the sacrifices that so many Canadians have made to allow us to, sit here and do webinars from our home offices quite safely and luxuriously. So thanks again for making the time today. For those of you who are not members of the working group or don't know me, my name is Ryan Greer. I'm the co-chair of the Canadian Chamber's National Cannabis Working Group. We also have Nathan Meissen on the line from Diplomat Consulting, who is my fellow co-chair. Nathan, are you here?
I am, yes, sir.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much,
welcome.
everybody, for attending. Excited to have our second round of National Cannabis Roundtable.
Yes, and of course, Nathan is referencing, he did a barnstorming tour across the country almost this time last fall for a series of roundtables. Normally the Chamber would, of course, be doing these things in person, but given the restrictions that we're all still under, we thought this was the next best thing. I just have a few things to run through quickly before we get started. I think everybody knows the reason why we're doing this, but as we all know, Health Canada is required to undertake its statutory review of the Cannabis Act starting next October, which is the 3-year anniversary of legalization. So last month, the National Cannabis Working Group announced that we would be leading an industry review of the Act, so we can identify consensus on some of the industry's biggest priorities and jointly advocate with you and amongst ourselves to Health Canada in advance of their review. This session is the first of 6 review consultations that the working group will be running this fall and this winter. These are public sessions, and they will be followed by more targeted consultations with working group members, public health advocates, academics, and others next spring, as we look to arrive at a series of recommendations that we can advocate on next spring and next summer, well in advance of Health Canada initiating its own review next fall. I'd like to thank working group members Dentons and Davies, specifically Eric Foster from Dentons and Eliza Kearney from Davies. Eric is leading our review process with the support of Eliza and Davies, and we are incredibly fortunate to have these 2 accomplished cannabis lawyers and their firms behind us as we embark on this effort. And I'll be turning things over to Eric here in a few minutes to lead today's session. I just have a few housekeeping notes to get through before we get started. The first is I want to remind everyone, and this went out in your reminder for the session, that this is a public consultation. This is not a working group meeting. This is a public consultation, which means members of the media may be present for some or all of the session. And as with any public event, please keep in mind that your comments during the session may be attributed to you or your organization. If there are any comments that you would like to make to us on anything discussed today that you may not want on the record, you can share those comments, any additional information, documentation, via the email listed on the slide currently on the screen, which is cannabis@chamber.ca. Again, that's cannabis@chamber.ca. So to reiterate, any comments made today are on the public record and are attributed to you or can be attributed to you by the media or others on this call. And again, if you don't wish to be on the record, you can certainly email us your comments. The topic of today's session is focused on Health Canada's service standards, licensing, and overall regulatory burden. We'd like, as much as possible, to keep your interventions focused on those topics. We do have future sessions scheduled on other issues that you may wish to raise in today's session that may be appropriate for those issues. So those future sessions are on November 25th. We're doing one on retail, economic development, and environmental sustainability. On December 9th, we're doing marketing, promotions, and labeling. On Wednesday, January 20th, we're doing medical cannabis and cannabis health products. On February 3rd, we're doing a session on the illicit market and anti-money laundering. And then on Wednesday, February 17th, we're doing a session on issues related to ancillary businesses. So, please try to stay as close as you can to the topics we're here to discuss today. And we look forward to welcoming you to future sessions. In the reminder email that you got for today's session, you can find the registration links for those future consultations, and you can also find them on the Canadian Chamber's events page, which is on the Chamber's website. We've got a large number of participants today, which is great news. We're really thrilled to see the level of interest, but it does mean we have to have a little bit of structure around how we proceed to make sure it's not a free-for-all. So As you all see, we're using life size for this session. On the bottom menu on your screen, if you're joining us via video, there's a hand raising function. Presently, all of our participants, except for a few of us leading the session, are muted and will remain muted while others are talking. When you're ready or you'd have something you'd like to intervene, you can use that hand raising feature, and Eric and our moderator, Christy from our office, can see that. Eric will be able to call on you, Christy will be able to unmute you, and then you'll be able to intervene and say your piece. And we just have to do this so we can not have to endure the paper shuffling that inevitably comes along with these large groups on video conferencing and background noise. If you are joining us via phone, you will need to switch to the life-size video conference function if you'd like to raise your hand and intervene. Also on the bottom menu of your screen, there's a chat function. So it's the little text boxes. Please use this also to share your comments and views during this session. For instance, if you want to agree or disagree with something that someone is saying or make a brief comment related to what's going on, please do so through the chat. The comments in the chat will also be used as part of the consultation record. Just a reminder that those can be attributed to you, but please do take advantage of that chat function because the high number of participants means it's going to be difficult to give everybody who may wish to a chance to say their piece today. And of course, when you are speaking, please try to be brief so that we can get to as many people as possible. For any interventions that you do make in the text or verbally, just please identify yourself and your organization before your comments. And then lastly, I was reminding everyone who joined early that we've also set up a series of poll questions for participants to answer that are going to help directly inform the results of this consultation. A link to the poll is located on the slide, which is currently on your screen. Please write it down. This slide will disappear here in a minute when I'm done speaking, but the address to fill out those questions, which you can do anytime during our session today or for half an hour after it closes, is www.sli.do, and then the meeting number you have to enter in your browser, which can be done on your phone or on your desktop, is C518. There's 12 questions. Please take a few minutes to fill them out while you're on this session or directly after. So thanks for bearing with me for this verbiage. Again, with such a large group, I know we may not be able to hear from everyone that we want to. So again, please share your ideas in the chat. Please answer the survey questions. And please, if you've got something non-public or anything else that you want to share with us, please email us at cannabis@chamber.ca. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Foster from Denton's, who's going to lead this session. Eric?
Terrific. Thank you so much, Ryan, and welcome everybody. Really, really exciting opportunity. Won't do all of the background. I think, Ryan, you did a great job of covering that, but really the purpose of this first session is part of the broader initiative to really get input from all the leading industry stakeholders to really bring forth recommendations that we can give to the government in advance of them kicking off their review. It's really a treat for me to be part of this, having worked in the industry for a good number of years. And of course, I'd be remiss not to mention Elisa from Davies, another absolutely terrific law firm that's quite active in the cannabis sector. So really looking forward to collaborating with her and the Davies team on this. But really, I think Denton's and Davies, we're the scribes. That's our role here, right? We are going to try to get as much information from folks like yourselves to come up with these meaningful options and meaningful submissions to the government. But again, you guys are the people who are in the weeds, literally, and a topic like this, I think, is going to elicit just a ton of really interesting discussion. So again, I think look at me and Ryan and Elisa and Nathan as kind of, we're here to serve you, we're here to serve the industry, right? This is all, we're not billing for this. This is just really such an important opportunity to move this industry forward in Canada. And that's really our sole focus for something like this. So as Ryan pointed out, there's going to be quite a few of these roundtables, 6 of them. Today, we're focusing on a topic I think that might actually be the most interesting of all of them, especially having sat through all of the various National Cannabis Working Group meetings. I know this is a subject matter that's near and dear. So in advance, everybody did receive kind of the 4 key points we're going to talk about. I'll just list them off right now, and then we can get started. And I'll apologize in advance. I am a little bit new to this in terms of the LifeSize platform, so I will be monitoring the chat. I will be monitoring whose hands are raised, and I will do my absolute best to call on everybody, but please bear with me because I'm also getting used to this technology as well. So as we dive right into it, I think we're going to discuss kind of 4 key subjects. The first is just the general industry expectations for the Health Canada review of the Cannabis Act, trying to figure out what us as an industry are looking for in terms of the scope and timelines, and what we realistically are expecting from the government to do. Next, we'll shift into a discussion around user fees and whether Health Canada should implement some sort of service standards for cannabis companies, and then any perspectives on how those standards should be established. We're then going to talk generally about licensing requirements and procedures, what works well, what's been improved, where is there room for improvement, and what, the folks on the line who are actually working with LPs would really like to see from the industry. And then just a general conversation we're going to conclude with on just the overall regulatory burden. It's something that I hear about day in and day out, working with companies in the cannabis industry. So, it's always a tough balancing act. They're trying to figure out how can we reduce the regulatory burden, but on the same note, ensure that we're still achieving the public health and safety objectives from the Cannabis Act. So I think those are the 4 main topics we'd like to talk about. In terms of industry expectations for the Health Canada review, I don't know if anybody wants to kick off on this point. If you do, of course, feel free to raise your hand right now. Something like this is in stepping back, the goal, I think, of what we as a group here are trying to do is when the government comes, when next year comes around on October, and the government kicks off their formal review as required by the legislation, we want to be in front of them in advance with effectively a submission paper and say, hey, you don't have to do your work. You don't need to take 18 months with this. In fact, we've done all of your work for you. We've spent the last 11 months canvassing the industry. We've done roundtables, lots of roundtables, lots of discussion. Here's a really thoughtful paper that has full industry input in it. So let's speed up the process. Thank you very much, federal government. We want this to move quickly, and we think it can because we've done all your work for you. So that's kind of the lens that we're constantly approaching both our role here in terms of what we're doing with the chamber, but also in terms of how we can influence the government to turn their Cannabis Act review into something that's meaningful, but also can be implemented pretty quickly. So again, not sure if anybody wants to jump in on this. I'm trying to check the hands raised, and I don't see anybody who wants to comment on this point. Oddly enough,
Eric, I mean, maybe I can just to add a little context. I think there's 2 things that you alluded to. One on the review. The first is the timeline, which Health Canada must start the review by next October, and then they have 18 months to table the results in the House, which moves us up to spring of 2023. My background is in the federal government. I have no doubt that the department would probably seek to use every ounce of that time, not to mention the impact that any federal election could happen, whether it be next spring, next fall, or the spring following, given the current political environment. So is it reasonable for us to ask Health Canada to accelerate that work, especially as we as industry are getting started? And then the second is really on the scope, which is if you read the scope, it's actually quite limited in what the department is proposing to review. And so what should we be asking to review? How should we be making that ask to them? My own personal view is that, the department probably can accelerate, and unsurprisingly, my own personal view is that I think the scope should be expanded, principally to look at how well it's accomplishing the government's stated objective of eliminating the illicit market, and what needs to be done to help move that process forward. So looking forward to hearing from what others here on the line.
And we have our first brave soul being Kim Purchase. So would love to get your thoughts, Kim. So Christy, I think you're able to unmute. Oh.
People, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay. So first off, I'd like to say thank you to the chamber and to you folks for getting out ahead of this. Folks of us who've been involved in this industry for a while know that in dealing with Health Canada, once they come out with their consultations and they set a scope, it can be very difficult to change their minds. And so, you guys getting out ahead and getting before them early is extremely important. And if there's one positive thing for the industry that came out of COVID, it has been it forced Health Canada at times to look at things that impact businesses in a way that they normally would not have, because there is no economic mandate for this industry, certainly not for Health Canada. And so if there's a way through this process and the determination of the scope to have those kinds of factors put in, whether it's to the reg standards, the fees, or the standards, such that the business outcome matters to some of these decisions, that I think would be a really important in establishing this scope, because there is no statutory or other reason to do it. And as I said, with COVID, we were lucky enough at times to get them to fundamentally understand that there were costs to people's business for some of even the smallest regulatory, well, I'll say irritants, but there's a lot of operational burden. So yeah, so I'd say if we can look at a way to broaden the scope so that the economics have to be factored in somehow, I think it would benefit all of us. So thank you.
No, I think that's a terrific point. And again, it's something I think we've talked about quite a bit actually at the national working group about, frankly, the lack of an economic mandate here. So again, I think in doing conversations like this with the industry, I think that's going to be a theme, frankly, that comes up quite a bit. So I'll move on maybe to the next. And again, I really want this to be an organic discussion. Like, I'm happy to sit here and moderate this, but of course, everybody's dialed in because we want you to also participate. So again, feel free at any point in time to chime in. And I was going to move on, but I see Matthew Herbert has popped his hand up. And the one thing actually I'm going to request too, when you are speaking, it may just be helpful if you can also state which company you're with or what your particular connection to the industry is. It's just useful, and I think it will provide helpful context to some of the comments that folks are making as well.
I can get that started. So my name's Matthew. I'm with CanScript. We're a medical cannabis platform, and we also operate the medical cannabis prescription switching service here in Canada. I just want to agree with the last speaker's comments regarding the importance on having an economic focus within scope, and perhaps even a competitiveness focus within that discussion as well. I think it's also important, given the COVID environment that we're in, to recognize how the economics is related very closely to healthcare as well. And so I think raising any economic arguments, we should also be talking about how the cannabis industry can help from a healthcare perspective to reduce any of the risks associated with COVID and the transmission of the virus. Until the vaccines are here and that goes away, I think those conversations are totally linked.
And I'm going to actually cold call on my good friend Nathan here, because I know the lack of focus on the economics of this is always been a pressure point for you, and something that you engage with the government, frankly, really trying to get them to continue to focus on that component of it. But any additional thoughts on this point, Nathan, before we move on?
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest things that if we want to see change in our sector, the opportunity to have the economic mandate included underneath the federal review would be incredibly important, not just at a federal level, but at a provincial level as well. From our analysis, we can't find the economics of cannabis at one provincial or federal ministry or ministerial mandate. So, when we see job losses in Oshawa, you'll see the Prime Minister and the Premier there, and we lost 2,500 jobs in one day in British Columbia, and nobody says anything. So the more that we can add that element to the conversation while the cannabis sector is growing, there's a significant opportunity for us to change the tenor of conversation. I'll just add one quick thought experiment. In the next 18 to 24 months, there's supposed to be 1,500 to 2,000 cannabis stores opened in Canada. Do we expect more cannabis stores to open or traditional retailers to close? I'll leave you to think about that for a second.
Yeah, well said as usual. Okay, so again, always happy. I think Ryan, you of all people, you're. I think you've popped your hand up here. I'm not sure if you want to chime in, Ryan.
Yeah, just one additional sort of piece of context for folks on the line. The work that we're going to be doing here, we actually have asked everybody in the survey, which you can go fill out during this session, but I expect we'd find a lot of consensus, unsurprisingly, for Health Canada to look at the economics of this, but we also want to reassure people that we're not only going to be talking about the economics of it. I don't think we're going to get a good audience with the Department of Health Canada if we're not talking about public health, if we're not talking about youth access and all the things that are principally already defined in their mandate. And so we will be, as we get through these industry consultations on the other side of that next winter, also be consulting with sort of relevant public health authorities and others and you in the industry to get a sense of how the public health side has responded. So it won't be only economics. We don't want to speak a language completely different than those of the regulator, but we do think it's important to get the economics plugged into the discussion.
Terrific, and I believe Malka LaBelle had some comments to make.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Malka LaBelle, and I'm the founder of the Green Generation Company, a consulting group working with a lot of industry producers, particularly micros. So I wanted to ask from the Health Canada perspective to include more non-clinical or real-world research in defining what are the benefits of cannabis to individuals from a health perspective. As a case example, Alberta Innovates has kicked off their M Cannabis Real Life, that's M.Cannabis Real Life grant program through Alberta Innovates, which is allowing companies to sort of broaden the definition of what clinical trials look like for cannabis. What we're seeing is that a lot of examples are showing up, but it doesn't really it doesn't fit into the box of clinical trials because cannabis is so different than pharmaceutical drugs. But so my ask is for Health Canada to broaden the research definition and include something along the lines of what Alberta Innovates is doing with that real world examples and real life research that they're doing right now. Excellent point.
And yeah, I think you'll get widespread agreement on from the group on that. So that's excellent. I don't see, I think Corinne from TGOD as well wanted to chime in.
Oh, Christy,
I was muted.
There we go.
There you go. I was just saying that adding to what Ryan said about the mandates, I think, of course, it's important to talk about public health. It's going to be important to talk about sustainability and all other subjects. I think the big difference is that we will, as an industry, need to fight for the economic impact to be part of the study. I feel like if we only talk to Health Canada, it won't be part of it. And the overall mandate, basically, of the review is up to the minister. So the time is right to have these kind of conversations because we will need, as a group, to work together to get champions to influence the minister to actually include the economic impact within the review as soon as possible.
So I think what we're hearing here, frankly, is a very clear view by everybody who's spoken so far that we want to get in front of the government again as early as possible, but also ensure whether it's left to the decision of the minister or whatnot to ensure that an economic mandate is really an important focus on what the government's doing overall. So that will be certainly noted. And I think Mimi wants to chime in, who I assume is, I think I saw Mimi on the line earlier too, actually. So we can perhaps unmute Mimi.
Mimi, go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Okay, perfect. Sorry. I think I put myself on mute as well. So I'm not sure if this is the right time to be asking about this, but because I do not personally directly I'm not on the cultivation side. This is me from Superette. We are a retailer. I think one of the common questions that we come across, especially given what we see in the US right now, is whether or not CBD products are going to be regulated differently than THC products. So I'm not sure if this is part of today's discussion or one of the future working groups, but just something that is top of mind on our end.
Yeah, no, that's good. And this is something, you know, I hear, I can't tell you how many. I've probably gotten 100 different questions from 100 different people about the regulation of CBD in Canada. And, you know, people just don't fully understand it. And again, I don't know if this is the exact session. I think this is the sort of topic, though, that's such an obvious and widespread issue that's going to be raised by so many people. My instinct is that's going to be frankly discussed at some level at almost every single one of the roundtables, because it is such a prevalent theme right now in terms of, and a pressure point on the industry too. So certainly happy to discuss that further, but maybe we can dive into this. And I think that actually some of the CBD conversation you just pointed out, Mimi, will actually dovetail quite nicely. But I wanted to chat in terms of our first point around user fees. And I know we have Ivan Ross Vrana from Evenco on the line, who had some initial thoughts that he wanted to share with respect to potential service standards and whatnot from Health Canada. So Ivan, maybe we can open up the floor to you.
I wonder if Ivan Ross has joined us via phone, so it might be challenging for our moderator to unmute him. Let me see if I can find which number you're on, Ivan Ross, so we can unmute him.
All right, so while we're waiting there, any additional thoughts on this point from any industry participants? And again, I suspect representatives, and I see a whole bunch of representatives from LPs are on the line. Oh, but Malka's popped her hand up again, so maybe we'll turn the floor over to Malka.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Okay. So in terms of service standards, I mean, I'm concerned that talking to a lot of the lab companies that are being, you know, pigeonholed into providing these, you know, COAs and lab results, they're, you know, what I'm hearing is that the labs don't have a set standard of delivery of lab results, lab testing results. And Health Canada has a direct, you know, they're authenticating labs and giving them license to operate as well. I think that's an issue that should definitely be looked at by Health Canada, is providing or allowing there to be a service standard set at the lab level as part of the service standard equation.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And again, this is one I'd really be curious to hear somebody from a licensed producer, you know, just in general, but also to the point that Malka just raised. You know, I think this is, and again, that's also a recurring theme that I've heard from clients and a variety of industry participants. So I do think it is a pressure point. And I see Deepak has popped his hand up. So maybe we'll let Deepak share his thoughts.
Thanks, guys. I just wanted to circle back on a comment that Mimi made, not specific. Sorry, I'm hearing some background noise here. So I just wanted to circle back on a comment that Mimi had made with respect to the CBD question. So Health Canada is actually releasing and has released kind of a scientific advisory committee to discuss cannabis health products. I would encourage anyone that's got feedback to send it to John Clare, who looks after the policy side of Health Canada. He's very receptive to discussions around CBD, particularly Mimi from a retailer's perspective, and what you're seeing from consumers coming into stores. We've had several discussions with John Clare from a business perspective, from a Medical Cannabis Canada perspective, from a Normal Canada perspective, and he's been very, very receptive to all of that feedback. So I would say that if there's anything on the CBD side, I would definitely connect with John Clare. John Clare kind of looks after policy at Health Canada, and I'm happy to share info with the working group in terms of his contacts, and you can reach out to him.
Thanks for that, Deepak. One note as well on CBD. We do have a future session in mid-January on cannabis health products, so we'll be devoting a significant amount of additional time to that one, but that shouldn't stop us from talking about it here. Eric, I think Ivan Ross has been unmuted, so I think he's on the line now and available to chat with us.
Yes, hello everyone. Thanks for that. I guess you can hear me now.
Yeah.
Hello. Oh, perfect. Okay. Yeah. Standard refrain. I know. Apologies for that. But Ryan, and I want to thank you for getting this all organized, and of course, Davies and Denton for donating your time on that, as we know this is a very important discussion. So on the service standards, you know, as a former federal public civil servant, and I used to work within the pharmaceutical industry where there were very well-defined service standards overall for the approval of a drug, a medical device, etc. I understand, you know, that this is a new industry and Health Canada is working away at it. However, they have no problem with collecting the money and not establishing any service standards, or what they're referring to as non-binding service standards. That totally has to be government lingua franca. That doesn't make any sense. That is getting into place, right? Whether that's somebody going through the application process, or, you know, license holder like we are and expecting a certain amount of turnaround time. And it really does frustrate me in a whole host of ways, like I'm sure a lot of people are dealing with that, because it impacts us obviously from an economic perspective and how quickly we can or cannot get our product to market. And it does seem like overkill, and I know this sort of feeds into the regulatory burden that we're doing, but I do not see in Canada, and I'm willing to look at examples and allow people to correct me if I'm wrong, any other industry to this point which has such a regulatory burden and service standards that are ill-defined and have not met timelines whatsoever by the department, or not even sort of recorded. And I'm, again, shocked, you know, since the very beginning of this program, that never happened. And we've all heard the horror stories of, you know, applicants getting in, you know, the day things changed, when the industry was starting to be created, and they're still 5 years, you know, down the line where they haven't gotten approval, or they have. So those are some of the initial comments, and you know, there's a million examples out there, but I think it really has a heavy burden on our industry. And to give you an example, our company is an export-oriented company. It takes Health Canada 2 months to issue an export permit, and they want their $660 for that. So 2 months, just as one example. And that boggles my mind, given, you know, they say they have a 30 business day service standard that's non-binding, which they don't meet. When a country like Germany, for instance, which doesn't have the history and, you know, the depth of understanding of a cannabis regime, can prepare an import permit for 2 weeks. And so, you know, I think this has to be a crucial sort of discussion. If they're going to take money from us to establish these service standards, and I've written a lot about this, then there has to be some sort of follow-up on what the reasonable timelines are for the government to deliver. To do so and not to do so under, you know, the Service Standards Act, User Fees Act, whatever you want to call it, I've always had the belief from the former parliamentarians that I've talked to, then, is Health Canada is outside of the bounds where essentially what they're implementing is a tax. And everybody knows we have enough tax in this industry. So this is where I think it's great to lead off with the service standards. I think it falls right into that, you know, discussion about the regulatory burden. But at this type of pace, it's quicker to get a new pharmaceutical product entity approved than it is for me to get another room approved at Health Canada, or for me to change a storage room into, you know, a functioning process room, or vice versa. So this is what I find extremely frustrating from a license holder perspective, and it galls me in the sense that we have such an inefficient program. Given Health Canada can say, you know, this is relatively new, but we've been working at this in one way or another for at least a decade, if not longer. So that's sort of the frustration, and I know that's not a great way to open it up for further discussion, and I think we've all shared that, but what I certainly want to see out of this is, like any other industry, like any other government department, if Health Canada has this, you have to have service standards, and they cannot be so wide-ranging that they don't mean anything. But that plays into the regulatory burden, and then that certainly plays into the economic impact. And I think, again, when we look just at the retail side in the provinces, and we all understand the horror stories of how long it takes for a store to get up and running, we have to be able to start to move this thing back. Because if companies do start to fail, there'll always be a whole host of reasons, but there's certainly responsibility enough to go around to say, you guys could not keep up with what the demand was. And you've done it to yourself, because the regulations you put into place are ridiculous. So those are the initial comments I just wanted to start with, to give everybody some sort of context and background. I know it sounds like a little bit of a rant. I don't want to be that frustrated old guy on the call, but we all have to live by this day to day. And if they charge us money for it, I think it's reasonable to expect a well-run industry from the regulator to say, this is when we'll deliver your product. So that's all I have to say on that. So thanks very much.
Yeah, no, thank you. Really helpful comments. And to be honest, I don't think that is ranting. And that's the whole point of this initiative, right? It's to figure out what those pressure points are. It's not just for everybody here in the industry, but it's for all Canadians, right, to make this industry a success. So it's important that we figure out, and you are there on the ground doing this, Ivan Ross. So to hear where the pressure points are and where you're feeling those frustrations, again, that's the whole point of this initiative. Want to unpack a few things there, but I do see that we have a couple of hands up. So maybe we can open the floor over to Rachel Dursa.
Hi, I just wanted to add to Ivan's comments that as far as the application process and Health Canada standards go, the security clearances are also an issue in the industry. I realized that they granted temporary clearance to people during the COVID outbreak, but that's something too that has a huge impact on operations, especially larger facilities. So just another comment to throw in there.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then maybe Sherry B, we can open the floor for you.
Sure. Hi, this is Sherry Boudram, the co-founder and CEO of CanDelta, a regulatory and scientific cannabis consulting company here in Toronto. Just wanted to also comment further on Ivan's point as well. Also coming from the government and having worked in the medical cannabis program, but also in other federal departments as well. I worked in the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency, which is a mining program that assists with environmental assessments for major resource projects like mining. And particularly in that sector, the regulations allow for legislative timelines where the agency itself has to respond to the minister or respond to certain inquiries within a legislated time frame. And I think something like that would be really beneficial, and it has been seen in other legislation. So I think that's really something important to consider when looking at reviewing what we currently have in the cannabis industry in terms of our framework and our legislation.
Yeah, no, and it's great. I saw you and Lucas and Dennis and all of our friends from CanDelta on here. So I was just gonna cold call on you anyways, because again, I know you're dealing with this day in and day out, and you're probably speaking. I guess in my role, I speak with a lot of industry participants just because we're counsel to them. Obviously, we have representatives from the companies, but I think nobody's speaking with that widespread number of industry participants than you and your team over there, Sherry. So it's really important, I think, to get. And same thing with Malk earlier, like the people who are actually providing consultancy services to the industry. Those are the folks I think who are just as likely as the LPs to really see where these current pressure points are. So really helpful to get your insight, and would love to hear more from you and the CanDelta team over the course of these discussions and today. Maybe jumping back though to something that was raised a little bit earlier was this concept around standardized testing, because it's a really interesting point, and I think I've heard about this coming up, and I guess the goal there is just to try to put in something, that standard that ultimately will make life a lot easier for the various LPs, and moreover, hopefully help them save a little bit of money. So anybody want to unpack that thought a little bit? Again, because I hear it day in and day out that testing is just a continual pressure point, and trying to put some specific service standards and parameters around that would probably go far in making life a little bit easier for a large number of stakeholders in the industry. So I'll pause there for a second to see if anybody wants to chime in on that, and if not, we can jump on maybe to the next topic. Oh, I see Andrew Hale's got his hand up.
Yeah, hi. Regarding the testing, I agree with you 100%. We have a license for standard processing and a separate analytical testing license. And when we've experienced for ourselves and our clients, the results are all over the map. You know, you can do a potency graph that show 25% swings in potency for label claims. One of the things that really is the problem is Health Canada has no standard for validation procedures for analytical testing labs. They're all homegrown. They're all the testing procedures are developed by the individual lab license. So a standard set of validated procedures that are applied across the nation would be very useful and would reduce the variability in the testing results. Some of the testing results are not as at issue, you know, pesticides, it's kind of almost like a go, no go, but really the potency and label claims data that is required to be put on every cannabis package is something that would require some kind of validation standardized practice that all the labs would have to follow then, so that at least you're getting the same result no matter who you go to.
Yeah, and that dovetails so nicely in terms of just the general health and safety objectives of the Act anyway. So again, in my mind, the government's going to be, you know, very receptive. I would like to think at least they're going to be very receptive to any recommendations that are really focused on preserving that public health and safety objective of the Act. So I think that's a really, really important point for us to keep in mind. I see Julia Cameron has her hand up, so maybe we'll go there. And then after that, Maya from, I assume you're from TheraPure Oil and that's not your last name. So. But Julia, maybe we'll open the floor to you first.
Hi everyone, this is Julia from Pure Sun Farms, here located in BC. We're a licensed producer cultivator here in British Columbia. And it's kind of a question to both of you, Andrew. Thank you for your comment on testing. I'm interested to hear from you a little bit around pathogen testing in terms of, you know, what we're seeing here is if batch after batch after batch is consistently coming back with negative, do we still feel that there's potentially an opportunity for us to talk about sampling or reduced testing in that case, given the results that we would see time over time?
So you're cutting in and out a bit there, admittedly, Julia. So I think we caught most of that, though. But Maya, if you want to, maybe we can open up the floor to Maya.
Hello. Yes.
Hi,
hi, my name is Maya. I'm from TheraPure Oil. We focus on medical cannabis extraction innovation for cannabis producers around the world. Our chief scientist, Daniel Maka, is here with me. He wants to make some short comments here.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see me, but okay, here, here I am. Okay, I wanted I made a bit of a synthesis of what was discussed before at the level of economics, and there was a very good point that was brought up about why pharmas get stuff done before we can get anything done. And something I'd like to bring up is, in approaching Health Canada, I think we need more consistency as far as our approach is scientifically, not only to potency, but also to all profiles. That's what's happening in the plant. And to show some consistency. And yes, I agree completely about the level of having a standardized form of analysis, but I think consistency is what the key is into any medical product. And I talk on my end of the medical marijuana. I'm not talking about the banner of recreational stuff. It's not at all my field. And I think it's important to demonstrate to Health Canada that we do have a consistency in our medication. We do have a consistency in our terpene profiles. And there's enough research out there at this point to be able to present it and to facilitate the fact that people who focus on medical cannabis can have access to a license a little bit faster. And if we export that, it should be a little bit faster. We need to put some weight also on our demand. And the weight has to be with a scientific basis, in my opinion. And that's what I've been experiencing a lot, because I also work as a naturopath doctor, and I work with a lot of cancer patients. And the hard part for my patients and for the extraction that's being done is to have a consistent medication. We all know that. And by making terpene profile disappear from websites from one day to the next is not a good thing. It's not a good thing towards Health Canada, towards us as suppliers, or towards the patients. So this is an important point. To standardize is definitely one thing. And maybe to have Health Canada designate one lab that can do the work, not 50 labs. And that's something we need to address as well. So that's my 2 cents on basically, helping towards the medical end of things. Because quite frankly, an oil that's CO2 extracted that's got 26% has no terpenes, in my opinion, is not as efficient as a 28% oil with a full terpene profile. And this is very important as far as the patients go, and I see it in results every day. So we need to bring that research. We need to bring some kind of standard between us to be able to promote this, and for them to see us not only as cannabis suppliers, but to see us as a medical field supplier as well.
No, and that's I think a really, really fair point. Oh, I see Ryan. You got your hand up again. So maybe I'll throw to you.
Great. We're just a little way past the halfway point of our session here today. I wanted to do one more quick plug for everybody that's listening in to fill out our survey on Slido. You don't have to download anything. We've got around a quarter of our respondents so far have participated in it. It's completely anonymous. So on your browser, on your phone, or on your desktop, you go to www.sli.do. That's www.sli.do. And then where it says meeting code, it's C518. That's meeting code C518. There's 12 questions that will also be used to inform this consultation, a mix of multiple choice as well as a few open-ended ones. Please, if you've got a couple of minutes while we're listening in or after we get off the line, to please fill that out. I just wanted to plug that before we continue, Mark.
Terrific. Excellent. So I think that's a good point also to jump on. And again, it ties nicely into the comments I think we just heard around general pressure points. Again, I don't want to jump to the overall regulatory burden concept yet, but obviously we're talking about the Health Canada licensing requirements and the various procedures that they have in place for license holders, whether you're a cultivator, processor, or whatnot. So want to hear really what's working well right now. Where is there need for improvement? Where is the bottleneck right now, whether it's early on in the licensing process or even afterwards, over the course of operating your business. Of course, you're going to be engaging with Health Canada on a fairly regular and ongoing basis. So would love to understand from people on the ground right now, where are those pressure points right now? Where are the bottlenecks? Because again, I think we also have to be mindful about how much we can accomplish. And I really do think with this, we can accomplish so much. But again, at the end of the day, we're going to have to be very targeted in terms of some of the things we really want to focus on and really have the government focused on. So would love to hear where, if there's anything, even you get granular in terms of where are the specific points where you are feeling pressure, where there are those bottlenecks. And I see Nathan's got his hand up, so maybe we'll let Nathan share some thoughts.
Thanks for that, Eric. I think one of the things that I believe is a significant issue that I would love to see more clarity on is the relationship between the provinces and the provincial regulators and the federal government. The communication between the two orders of government and the representative branches that the license holders and retailers have to do and interact with is quite often very difficult. We've had experiences where we've needed clarity from the provincial regulator that requires clarity from the federal regulator, and that has been very difficult to receive. So more discussion and structure around the roles and responsibility of how there could be better interactivity at a federal provincial level. It would be incredible if we did a best practice analysis of what we have done well during this, and that we actually show where there's an opportunity for us to find solutions to ease that communication, so that all of us who are on the ground dealing with the day-to-day have greater clarity between the orders of government.
No, I think that's a good point. And again, that's going to come up in this topic and so many other, the funny thing about this industry, you're dealing with so many different layers of government, and none of them, frankly, are all that coordinated. In some situations, obviously, we've seen them work really nicely together. But even in terms of just the provincial models, right? You've got 10 completely different models out there. And it's been a huge pressure point, I think, for the industry, trying to ensure that the various levels of government, even all the way down to municipal, are interacting appropriately. Because I've seen things just kind of questions asked that should be pretty straightforward, and they just kind of disappear into the ether, and you can't get a straight answer sometimes. So absolutely appreciate that. I think Kim wanted to chime in, and then we can go to Hardeep and then Dario.
So, in terms of the level of granularity, to give a sense of what some of these choke points are, just even how they do what they do. So oftentimes with Health Canada, there's a randomness to how they decide that they're going to work. Anybody who's involved with licensing new products, we have to submit something called an NCCP. There's a clock that goes with that. If you even so much as remove a word, and I'm speaking from experience, you submit something that has natural and artificial flavors and realize that's a mistake, artificial's coming out, it restarts the clock and it restarts the whole process. And now they've decided that it's not something that they necessarily need to do anyway, so they're doing it on a risk-managed basis. So there's a real opacity to how they do things. What is a risk-managed process for a regulator? And there's a few of those now, and they show up randomly. Same thing with many of the permits, licenses. You go into a generic mailbox, you're assigned whoever's actually working. You've got that first in, first out business. So you could have 4 or 5 things going on with 4 or 5 different people. They may or may not reach their target for a service standard, but that doesn't matter because there's no assignment of any kind of priority. So if somebody is caught in an export situation, there's nobody looking at it in terms of, this could be a real problem. It's first in, first out. So even how they do, even if you take out the service standards, looking at how they do everything that they do it's like we're not really doing business on the other side. So even if you take out the economic impact, there's no sense of the speed of business in any of the way that they decide. And if you push back and try and get a decision, then there's often a counter pushback of the first in, first out. So it's not just a lack of service standards, and it's not even the justification of the fees. It's sort of like a 20,000 foot, all of these things fit together, and nobody seems to be looking at how they fit together. So, I just raise those as things that look like small irritants, but when you put them all together, you could be 60, 90 days in trying to get an NCCP for a product that's never even been on the market. So for folks who don't deal with this, I apologize, but this kind of stuff takes up so much time.
Yeah, but that's exactly what, so I shouldn't say that's what we're hoping to hear, because it's not good that it's taking up so much time. But again, it's great to hear really specific examples like this in terms of those pressure points and where those bottlenecks are. I think Hardeep wanted to make some comments.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So, yeah, my name's Hardeep. I work with Elevated Signals. We're manufacturing software for the cannabis space. So, I have an opportunity to work with large-scale producers as well as micro. So, working with Pure Sun Farms, but also working with people like Parkland Flower and whatnot. Some of the challenges that I really see, or I see that our producers face, is especially right now, given that the number of micro licenses is increasing, is expectations and education from Health Canada. And when I say expectations, it's about like, if you're going through your first Health Canada audit, what are the things that you'll be audited on? What are things that your SOPs should include? A lot of the onus is kind of really put on the producer in order to work with a consultant to figure out what is kind of like the hearsay of what should be expected of them when they're going to have the first audit, or they're going to submit their 2 batches for their sales amendment, cultivation license, whatever. So a lot of it is around kind of expectations in terms of the framework that they're working in. And then it's also about education. So, they're in month 1, month 2, month 6 of their their operations. And one of the issues that I see constantly is just in terms of reporting to Health Canada. So both the CRA and the CTS. So, how do you actually fill out your CTS? What are the different columns and what do they represent? There's kind of like a lot of nuances within that paperwork that they have to submit. And what we usually see is it takes about 2 weeks for producers when they're first understanding how this works in order to actually get that submitted. And you can imagine that's like a huge sink in their time in which they could be actually operating their businesses, setting up their sales partnership, sales channels, and their, understanding like how they're actually going to operate as a business. So those are some of the challenges that I see for early entrants into the space.
Excellent. I believe we have Dario and then Cameron Bishop next.
Hi, everybody. Dario Yaginovich from CanDelta here. I just wanted to echo a few things that were mentioned before, but also raise a few other things. A little bit about what has actually been good, positives that we've seen in the last little while. A few months ago, we saw an improvement in the CTLS platform. We saw the 2.0 version get rolled out. I think that's been overall a pretty big success. We've seen a lot of LPs consider that to be more streamlined their processes and allowed them a little bit more clarity in terms of what they need to submit to get certain things done. At the same time, they've also streamlined their process for achieving site amendments. So converting operations areas to other operations areas has now been streamlined, and you no longer need to do any kind of approval process or notification for more simple changes. I think that's definitely improved on the bottleneck and the waiting times. So those are the good things, and we're hoping to see more improvements on the CTLS side from things like that. Just to echo a few of the things that we have seen be a challenge, again, the service standards are definitely a huge thing. I think a big one, obviously, on the security clearance side of things. I'm not sure if we're ever going to get very much improvement on that, since that is a very cloak and dagger process. But if we did have some kind of, by now they have some statistics as to how many clearances have been granted and processed. Maybe they can give us some clarity on what can be the expected timelines, at least for that process, and how they can change based on a person's where a person's resided in the past. Other things after licensing is things like sales amendments. There's not a very good service standard for sales amendments. Like, we know the process pretty well internally, but this can also vary quite a lot. So especially if it's your first inspection, as Hardeep had mentioned previously. So a bit more guidance as to how to conduct those kinds of first round inspections is definitely important. as well as things like more difficult site amendments, like changing your secured storages. Those things can take months at a time, and there's not a lot of clarity on how long it'll take to process something like that in terms of complexity, or if it'll even get approved. As well, things like how long a request for more information from Health Canada will take to be read and processed. I think one of the main things that could be improved is the response times for email questions. Health Canada always tells you, here's the email that you should send all of your questions to. But if I'm receiving a response to my question 3 months down the road, that's probably not very useful to me. And we've seen that be sometimes a very short amount of time, but oftentimes it's very long. So giving us some kind of service standard for at least some kind of response, or to tell us we'll get back to you, is definitely helpful. And the last thing I want to mention is some of the timelines for people that are going through the licensing process for the first time. There's a lot of hearsay about what's going to make your licensing a little bit faster or shorter. Is a micro faster than a standard? Is an outdoor faster than an indoor, etc.? This is all just kind of anecdotal evidence from the industry, but if we can get a little bit more clear, a little bit more of a clear understanding of that from the regulators, that would really help inform people and plan out their businesses more safely and also more economically.
Excellent, and you're definitely not alone in not getting immediate calls back from Health Canada. I think I kind of help lead one of the largest of cannabis practices in the country, and they don't necessarily return my calls either, too. So you're not alone. We get calls all the time from clients saying, "Can you call on our behalf?" We can. Yes, we can, but ultimately we may get you may get responded to even faster. But I know Cameron has some thoughts, and then maybe we'll go to Lisa Campbell after that.
Cameron, go ahead.
Cameron,
Go ahead and unmute yourself.
I think Cam's muted.
Yeah, Cam's muted. So maybe we can go to Lisa first, and then maybe we can try to jump out.
I'm here. Oh, there you go.
All right. Excellent.
That's odd. Okay, so this is probably more, it's less about the Health Canada regulatory piece and more on CRA, and I have certainly spoken about this a number of times, and that is the issue that we have right now, whether you're a small, medium, or large producer of multiple excise stamps. So, you know, everybody knows that legal cannabis products are required under legislation agreed to by the federal, provincial, and territorial governments to have a unique excise stamp for each province and territory, but that becomes really problematic when you think about the logistics of applying these stamps and the product delays and administrative and cost burdens that actually result. So one of the things I think that the federal government needs to have a look at very quickly with its provincial territorial counterparts is a move to one national excise stamp. It becomes very difficult to move product from one part of the country to the other if you have to bring it back into the facility, remove the stamps often manually, because I don't know that there's any sort of machine that can remove them intact. They have to be removed manually and then repurposed for another jurisdiction. And that means that, you know, especially if you're trying to move product to maybe one area of the country, let's say Alberta, and you want it to go to Nova Scotia, a smaller jurisdiction, or even to one of the territories, again, it's just it's a cost that people should not have to, or companies should not have to bear. So the national excise stamp would be a fantastic thing to move towards. The other thing that I would like to see, and it's kind of in that same spirit, is the Finance Canada needs to take a look at the impact that the excise tax itself is having on larger format or value products. You know, when the cannabis price was higher at the outset of legalization, I'm just going to say, let's say when it was $10 a gram or whatever, you know, 10% was one thing, but now depending on the products that are out there, it can make upwards of 30 to 35% of the selling price, and it's disproportionate to the price, and it's having an impact on companies' bottom line. So I think on the excise stamp piece, as well as the excise, and I know it's a heavy lift because a lot of governments are going to say that they need the cash, but the reality is that it's starving a lot of businesses from being competitive and actually making and turning a profit, regardless of whether you're a small, medium, or large player. That's it for me. Thanks.
Excellent, great points. Maybe we can open the floor to Lisa now.
Hey everyone, thanks for the great discussion today. So just building on what Cameron was just saying, I agree that while cannabis should be taxed, and it's a great argument for legalization, the excise tax definitely needs to be examined, especially in the case of concentrates, where you have 1 cent per milligram, up to 1,000 milligrams a package. So that can be up to $10 excise per package. So in terms of creating concentrates that are competitive with the legacy market, if you add $10 on tax on every concentrate, it's very, very hard for producers to be competitive and to offer affordable prices. The other thing I want to bring up was about cannabis packaging. Right now, there's so many different interpretations of the Cannabis Act when it comes to packaging, a lot of non-compliant packaging on the market, and of course, lots of debates in terms of what compliance looks like. I think what we really need from Health Canada would be some guidance documents on interpreting cannabis packaging, especially for concentrates and other 2.0 products. I think that every province has a different interpretation of the Federal Cannabis Act as well. And I think in terms of quality assurance, it definitely slows things down if QA at every level, whether it be the different producers, the provinces, Health Canada have different interpretations of the packaging regulations. So I think that's something important to look at. Finally, I think the biggest bottleneck that we're seeing for all of the licensed producers that we work with is around the sales amendment to get their products to market. In particular, for micros across Canada, there's a lack of understanding that you need a sales amendment to get your product into the provinces. And I think that the provincial distributors, the category managers, are very much overwhelmed with the amount of requests they're getting from over 500 producers across Canada that don't fully understand that you need a sales amendment to sell to the province before you can get to market. So I do see that, we're in a situation where it's almost predatory, where the majority of licensed producers don't have the sales amendment and are forced to sell to a selected amount of processors that do. So I'm really hoping this is a bottleneck that we can solve moving forward.
No, really, really terrific points there. So Shirley, and then I see Cameron has his hand back up, so maybe we can go to Shirley first and then jump back to Cameron.
Shirley, go ahead.
Shirley, you there? Okay, well, maybe we'll jump back to Cameron, and then we can come back to Shirley and see if we can get the audio fixed for her.
Yeah, so I just want to, one of the things that I wanted just to reiterate, and I guess it goes to Lisa's point, and it was something that I meant to bring up, and that is also the lack of a national excise stamp really does impact as well packaging waste, because a lot of those boxes can't be repurposed when you've removed the things because it rips off the paint or whatever else. So we're actually having to make, obviously there's a cost added to it, but it adds to the argument that the packaging burden is a huge one. That's all I wanted to add. Thanks.
Terrific. And do we have Shirley? Yeah, maybe we'll try one more time. You there, Shirley? Okay. So maybe we jump in. I'm mindful of everybody's time and really do appreciate the good discussion so far. I think this is a time maybe to jump just to our last topic, and I'll defer to, of course, my good friend Nathan on some of these points. And I think, to be honest, a lot of this is what we've already talked about, right? Over the last 15, 20 minutes in terms of where are those biggest pressure points right now? What is the overall regulatory burden that's facing the industry? So I know, Nathan, this is something that is near and dear to your heart, putting that lightly. So would love to get some initial thoughts for you around what you're hearing, what you see being kind of the boots on the ground in terms of that overall regulatory burden facing federally licensed cannabis businesses, and then beyond that, what steps you think we can reasonably take, keeping in mind, of course, the overall goal of ensuring public health and safety objectives.
I think it's really important. Thank you, Eric. I think it's really important at this point to remember that the cannabis sector interacts with all three orders of government. And as we're going through a federal review, which creates the legislative standard for the country, that we open up the conversation about how the burden that cannabis companies face is actually shared at all three orders of government. If you look at examples for cannabis retailers in Vancouver, for example, where you know, the most expensive business permit is $5,000, except for cannabis retail, where it's $33,000. Or the roles of licensed producers with agricultural land, ALRs, land reserves in British Columbia, or taxation in Alberta that we've seen. So I think that there's a real interesting opportunity for us to have a conversation about the burdens that the cannabis sector faces, and the opportunity for us to use a tragic, unfortunate circumstance like the global pandemic to talk about the fact that cannabis is now an essential service, which is an incredible testament to all the people that are on this call. And for, you know, some of the people that have been around, it is hard to imagine that that would have happened less than 2 years over cannabis legalization, that we need to continue to advocate for reducing the legal burden while still adhering to the objectives of cannabis legalization to create good jobs in communities that are diversifying the economy while displacing the illicit market. And I think that is something where there's an opportunity for us to have some of those conversations and insight from people from coast to coast to coast about what works where and how we can find efficiencies to create greater opportunities to lessen the burden. Many provinces are undertaking a red tape reduction process right now. So the more that we can do a best case analysis and bring that to the federal government, perhaps there's an opportunity when the federal government asks the province for their submission, we can find some real resolution to ease the burden across all three orders of government and create an opportunity for our sector to flourish and fulfill the mandates of cannabis legalization.
Very thoughtful and pithy points as always, Nathan. Would expect nothing less from you. I see Adrian Rodriguez has a hand up as well, so maybe we can open up the floor.
Yep, this is Adrian Rodriguez from CCI Deloitte. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you everyone for the platform to provide all these very important points. I think the point that I wanted to make is that, and one that we haven't talked about too much yet today, is that as part of this review of the Cannabis Act, we really need to look at the burden of the promotional section of the Act and how it relates to customer acquisition strategies. We have a very restrictive promotional framework within the Act, especially when we consider the role that brand recognition and brand loyalty play in the primary mandate of curbing the illicit market, and also considering that other highly regulated industries have much more permissive frameworks. So if we are going to be doing a review of the Act, I think that there is a lot of opportunity for growth in the cannabis industry when we're looking at how those promotional strategies need to be, we just need to do more work from a regulatory perspective on this regulatory burden. Thank you.
Yeah, really, really good point. And again, I'm also actually equally surprised that that hasn't come up more in this discussion, because again, it's another one of those topics that we hear, or at least I hear day in and day out from clients and other industry participants, and it's really tricky right now, I think, for licensed producers. Again, I'm not sure if anybody else is brave enough to raise their hand to talk about this, but absolutely, this is something that rings really true to me, and I think it impacts both, you know, companies, you know, on the producing side, but it also has an impact, I think, on the retail side too, right? It's really hard to get a feel for this. I find that, and I hear this not just from industry stakeholders, but also from friends and people who are going into stores right now and saying it just feels like a transaction. It's nothing more, it's nothing less. There's no feel really to the industry right now, and some of that ties back into the limits on marketing and whatnot. But like I said, even when you go into a store, you're just looking at a menu of it's the same products, all taken from the same government warehouse. You go in, you buy it, and you walk out. Like it's missing kind of that almost social element, and that real feel that I think is really important for any sort of consumer packaged good product, which is really what this industry has effectively become. I see Corinne from TGOD has a few more comments, so maybe we'll open the floor to her and then jump back to Malka. Oh, Corinne, are you there?
Jesus, that's.
There you are. Oh, I think you're on mute. I don't think, or at least I can't hear you. Maybe
Is it working now?
Yeah,
Okay, good. Sorry about that. I was saying that from a federal government point of view, they also have to realize that these promotional regulation are having unintended consequences, which is basically because we can't speak to our consumers. It's pushing the way that quality is designed is people see now quality as being higher THC, right? And I think we need to be able to speak to our consumers about what the products, everything that the product has to offer, from terpenes to entourage effect to everything around it. And so I think that talking about promotion is related to public health, because right now we're basically pushing people to maybe stronger product that they normally would be buying if they had more information.
Excellent. So we'll jump to Malka and then back to Cameron.
Yeah, so I mean, I am actually really glad that the government chose to really restrict the promotional allowance for cannabis products, because I don't think it should be a CPG brand. I think that the retailer should be able to communicate more openly within the store setting, and that the retailer should attract to their brand and sit down, have the opportunity to sit down with the client or the patient, whoever walks in their store, and give them an education, because that's what they're coming in for. They want to learn more. And have someone guide them through what are the different options, why would they choose one over the other, and making it a brand play and going on a high dollar advertising campaign for a brand, I don't think is beneficial for the majority of people that are wanting to use cannabis that have never tried it before. So having the education be the focus, I think the unintended consequences that Karina is speaking about is true, but it's impacting the retailers, where they're not allowed to have open education concepts and discussion around the benefits or even the anecdotal benefits with the consumers. And that's where it's really hitting. And they're just basically buying whatever has the highest THC. So I think that reducing the burden at the retail level and opening up retail education as the marketing concept as opposed to the packaged concept, I think that's what should be the direction that we go in. So it's not a CPG thing. It's here, go into retail, get an education on everything for your personal use and needs, and then we'll guide you to the right products that fit your needs, as opposed to being so transactional.
No, really, really fair points. And again, I think like everything, there's a balance there. But again, that is a major issue, I think, for retailers, and I'm sure it's something that Mimi and some of the other retailers on the line have felt pressure navigating as well. And again, we're going to jump quickly back to Cam right now, I think, as well.
I guess I would just reiterate what the last 2 points, except to add that the government has to do a better job. And I think that, we can have maybe a more fulsome conversation about this when we start talking about the promotion angle, but the government needs to do a better job on cannabis literacy. They expect a lot from the licensed producers, but the regulations, as has been expressed, allow almost no education whatsoever. And Health Canada is loath to actually partner with any sector, certainly with our sector, from everything that I've seen. So what you get out of Health Canada is quote unquote education that is basically scare tactics and stupidity that shows, don't drive high, and with the national partnership against Mad Canada and drug-free kids and all this stuff. It's basically reefer madness repackaged as something else. So if they expect that the sector as a whole, be they retailers or producers or ancillary businesses, are going to be up and willing to partner or to do anything on the education side, they need to take a step back and look at how their regulatory environment is precluding that conversation. As well, I would just kind of also add in that same spirit, I mean, even the fact, and again, I think we can talk about this in the promotion, but I want to get it on the agenda now. We are also precluded, we can talk about education, but we're also precluded from doing anything by way of sponsorships within our various communities, again, from a regulatory standpoint. So I think this is also a conversation that lends itself to the economic development angle, because cities are in need of different infrastructure and different sponsorships that we could kind of come to the table and offer, not allowed. And how is that impacting everything else around? So from a cannabis literacy standpoint, we are hemmed in. An education standpoint, we are hemmed in. And from a sponsorship standpoint and an ability to properly contribute and get some modicum of publicity, we are also hemmed in. So I just kind of put that on because I think it transcends 3 or 4 different areas. Thank you.
Terrific. And I see Adrian from CCI Deloitte has some additional thoughts he'd like to share.
Yeah, thank you. Just to Cameron's point in terms of the cannabis literacy, I think one point that I also want to make with respect to all these very excellent points is that a review of the Act should also have a mandate to modernize the Act when it comes to promotional strategies, to go beyond what Health Canada thinks of promotion and include the new platforms that people want to use. Retailer level education is important, but we also have to meet the consumer where they're at, and that happens online a lot. So we need to talk about specifically how the Act and the regulations affect the way in which we create that cannabis literacy, whether it's going to be government driven or it's going to be producer driven at the digital level, at the online level as well.
Excellent. So again, mindful of time, looks like we're getting close to the appointed hour. Maybe I'll open up the floor, although it's been, I guess, open the whole time. Just if anybody has any final thoughts, hopes, dreams, aspirations they'd like to share. Again, from my perspective, this has been tremendously helpful, and I can tell you the folks from Denton's will surely be chatting with the folks at the Chamber and Elisa and her team over at Davies. And again, we've been sitting here taking really good notes. So just getting this amount of feedback from industry participants, again, I can't really keep reiterating how helpful this is to the overall process in terms of driving meaningful change for this industry, again, for the betterment of all Canadians. So I'll see if anybody has any final comments they'd like to make, and if not, maybe I'll throw it back to Ryan. I'm sure, as usual, you got a few plugs to make, and maybe just some wrap up remarks, Ryan.
Great. Thanks, Eric. If just before we wrap up in the last 5 minutes, anyone does have one other thing they wanted to mention, please feel free to raise your hand and we can fit you in or post it in the chat. I just want to say thanks to everybody who's taken time out of their day to listen in on this and participate on this. There was an active discussion going on in the chat. I want to let you know that we are taking all that, and that's going to be fed into the same input that we were taking notes with for what was discussed here verbally. So thank you for everybody who was using the chat. If you didn't get a chance to say something that you did want to say, a reminder that you can email us cannabis@chamber.ca. That email will be open for the duration of our consultations. I mentioned off the top, this was the first of 6 sessions. The reminder email you received for this session will have links to where you can sign up for the future sessions. That will also show up in the Canadian Chamber of Commerce's events page if you Google that. And I will also tweet out the information on the Twitter account for the National Cannabis Working Group, which is @CCC_cannabis. And then I have one more big favor to ask everyone who's listening in and still with us, which is if you could please fill out the Slido survey that we've set up for this session. It'll take you no more than 2 or 3 minutes. Christy just posted the link in the chat. So if you click the chat, you can click on Slido, it'll pop up, you can enter the meeting thing, it'll take you no more than a minute or 2. So that's www.sli.do, and the meeting code is C518. It's anonymous, it'll take you 30 seconds. You can still do it after the session wraps up if you want to take 2 minutes before you go on with the rest of your day. So I really appreciate everybody taking the time. I think I would get unanimous agreement that Eric did an incredible job moderating this session, and we really appreciate him doing so. And of course, we appreciate Denton's and Davies for all of their support. They have some note takers on the line who were listening to everything that was mentioned today. Really, really want to say thanks to Denton and the Davies for stepping up, and everybody who's taken some time to participate in this. So unless there's anything else, we can call that a day. We've finished one session, and we hope to see most of you at the next one that we'll have coming up 2 weeks from today.
Terrific. Seeing no further hands up as always. Thank you very much again. And I love this stuff. This is what I do literally 21 hours a day most days. So feel free to reach out independently outside of this. Again, it's such an important initiative, and everybody's input really is going to make a big difference. So thanks again, everybody, and looking forward to chatting again 2 weeks from today.
Fantastic.